Welcome to the Language Alchemy Podcast, where we explore how our language and communication patterns directly impact our lives and relationships, and where you get transformative communication tools to bring forth more authenticity and compassion to all your relationships. Thank you for joining me today. This is your host, Alejandra Siroka, a communication teacher and coach who is devoted to helping multicultural individuals, change makers, and couples engaged in personal growth experience the lives and relationships they long for through the power of transformative communication. Today, we are going to talk about one of the most exhausting patterns in human relationships, which is what happens when we get stuck in long-lasting conflicts with people we care about. You know the scenario I'm talking about. There's that one person, maybe it's your partner, a family member, a close friend, or even a colleague. And there's something about them or something between the two of you that just keeps triggering you. And it's been going on for months, maybe even years. And instead of resolving it, you find yourself caught in what I call the spin cycle. The issue keeps going. You keep the conflict going round and round in your mind, and there is no solution in sight. In this episode, we will explore 3 costly mistakes people make in the face of long-standing conflicts. So listen carefully, because you may be making one of them. Whether you're navigating cultural differences in a multicultural relationship, dealing with family patterns that go back generations, or simply trying to communicate more consciously with people you find challenging, this episode is for you. Let's start by considering a common scenario that generates long-lasting conflicts in many families. I'm talking about the relationship with an in-law. In the example I'm going to give you, Priya is Indian American, and she's been married to Willie, who's a white American, for several years. Willie's mother, Penny, who's also a white American, has a pattern of making quote-unquote helpful comments about Priya's culture and choices. Her comments have triggered Priya for years. But Priya has not talked to Penny about any of this, although it's obvious that there's tension between her and Penny. What Priya has done over the years have led Priya to get stuck in a mental spin cycle about this conflicted relationship with her mother-in-law. This conflict has developed after hearing Penny make comments regularly when she is visiting Willie and Priya. Comments like, "Oh, you're making Indian food again? Willie must be craving my pot roast. That's his favorite type of comfort food, actually." Or, "Are you sure you want to speak Hindi to the baby? It might confuse her when she starts school." Or, "I brought some real spices from the grocery store. I wasn't sure if you had any normal seasonings." Or, "Willie seems tired lately. Are you sure you're not working too much? I saw him doing the laundry." All right, so now you have the scenario. Let's look at how Priya handled this long-standing conflict with her mother-in-law, Penny. As you listen to this episode, I invite you to put yourself in Priya's shoes to see if you tend to do the same in your life with the people with whom you may have long-held conflicts, or with those you may find challenging. There are 3 costly mistakes we make when we handle long-standing conflicts. I'm calling them mistakes because ideally, when we have a conflict, it's useful to take the kind of action that can help us solve the conflict. In my experience as a communication teacher and coach, I see that people make 3 common mistakes, and they're mistakes because they do not lead to resolution. On the contrary, these 3 mistakes lead us to a spin cycle in which the conflict sticks around for a long time. So many of us fall into these patterns, I certainly did in the past, that I want to help you do something different. So listen to see if these mistakes sound familiar. First, We blow things out of proportion through judgment and criticism. We analyze everything we consider wrong with the other person. We dissect their character flaws. And we build a case for why they are the problem. If you are in Priya's shoes, this may sound like Penny is so controlling and passive aggressive. She always thinks she knows best. Or she's probably racist, but would never admit it. I've heard her make such horrible comments about Wang, Willie's friend. I bet she just wants to erase my culture from Willie's life. But she doesn't own culture and she has no clue about the world we live in. Who does she think she is? So now, whatever Penny did or said became much larger. So much so that we might even recruit others to validate our perspective, seeking allies who will agree with our negative interpretations. When we blow things out of proportion, the situation seems completely out of hand because we are seeing the other as someone impossible or unworthy of collaboration or communication. And our sense of capacity for handling a conflict shrinks. We feel hopeless. We think that we could never have the tools to resolve the conflict because in our mind, we have made the other or the situation too big or too powerful, and we have made ourselves too small or completely powerless. So this is when we say to ourselves, this is too big. This will never be resolved. The other person is too damaged, mean, selfish, unconscious, proud, etc., to be able to listen, to have a conversation, to be open to a resolution. And when this happens, we go into the second mistake we tend to make. The second mistake we tend to make is that we resign ourselves. We throw up our hands and decide the person we're in conflict with is impossible, unchangeable, set in their ways, like a statue that will forever stay in a fixed position. In this case, we tell ourselves, that's just how they are. They'll never change. In the example we're working with, Priya may say, Penny will always find something wrong with anything I do. She is incapable of seeing other people's value. She'll never change. And this may or may not be so. But in reality, it doesn't matter, because what matters here is that when we resign ourselves because we hold a solid, a fixed image of the other person, we see them as unchangeable and fixed. We completely give up on two possibilities. First, we give up on the possibility of transformation. And secondly, we give up on the possibility of resolution. And even if there is evidence that the other person isn't fixed, we disregard any changes the other person has made or is making, and we stay attached to our sense of resignation. This giving up feeling leads us to the third mistake, which is the most exhausting and unproductive way of handling long-standing conflicts. This third mistake, it is what I call mental spin. We get caught in an endless mental loop in which we do a combination of the first two, blowing things out of proportion through judgment and criticism, and resigning ourselves, and then we add to this mix other factors in our internal dialogue, such as rehashing the conversation, hearing every word in our minds, sensing the tension in our bodies, trying to figure out what went wrong and why we keep getting triggered. And we may even spin out of the situation and even the person we're in conflict with and transfer it to past experiences in our life with other people who have nothing to do with the current situation or the current person. This is how we get caught in the spin cycle. In the example we've been working with, Priya may say to herself, why did she say real spices? Was she implying my spices aren't real? Or she may ask herself, should I have said something when she criticized me for speaking Hindi to my daughter? Or she may say something like, Penny is just like my second grade teacher, Mrs. Johnson, who would not allow me to bring my mother's homemade food to school and called it smelly. That's what Penny is like. So this is what the spin cycle sounds like in our minds. Let's talk in more detail about this spinning pattern, because I suspect you may recognize yourself in what I'm about to describe. When we spin, our internal dialogue becomes like a broken record. We replay conversations over and over. We think about what the other person said, what we should have said. We try to find rational explanations for their behavior and rational justifications for our own reactions. We even hear a distorted tone of voice and see inaccurate imagery in our mind's eye, like exaggerated gestures and facial expressions. But here's where it gets particularly painful. We don't just analyze the other person. We turn the criticism inward on ourselves. We ask ourselves questions like, how did I fall short? What did I do wrong? When am I going to learn? Why am I so naive, broken, generous, kind, foolish, etc.? With my client, whom I've been calling Priya, she shared with me she would wake up in the middle of the night thinking, maybe I am working too much. Am I being a bad wife, a bad mother? And if, like Priya, you're someone who's done personal development work, and I know that if you are listening to this podcast, you are interested in your personal development, then know that when you are caught in the spin cycle, self-criticism can be even harsher. You may say to yourself, I shouldn't get triggered by this anymore because I meditate, or I'm a spiritual practitioner. I should be beyond this. Or I've already worked on this issue in therapy or coaching or that workshop. I should be over this by now. Or I'm better than this, or I should be better than this. In fact, my client, the one we've been calling Priya, said to me, Alejandra, I am supposed to be more evolved than other people. I meditate, I've done therapy, I read books. Why do I still get so triggered by her comments? The spin cycle is exhausting because it requires running yourself against the other person and also against yourself. So we need to see the spin cycle for what it is. It is violent. You're not just in conflict with the other person. You are also at war with yourself. So what can you do if you find yourself spinning in a seemingly never-ending conflict? Well, for now, what I recommend is to notice that this is what you're doing. If you have a long-standing conflict with someone, then listen to your internal dialogue and become aware if you're making one of these mistakes. If you are blowing things out of proportion through criticism and judgment, if you are resigning yourself in considering the other person impossible or the conflict completely unsolvable, or if you're getting caught in a negative mental spin cycle. Remember, you cannot change what you are not aware of. So raise your awareness first. And then realize that the more you indulge these thoughts and interactions in your internal dialogue, the longer the conflict will last. Thirdly, be completely honest with yourself. Do you want this conflict to last for another 2 weeks? 2 more months, 2 more seasons, 2 more years, 2 more decades? If your answer is no, then subscribe to the Language Alchemy podcast so that you do not miss the next episode, episode 175, in which I am going to teach you how to break free from the spin cycle. Thank you so much for listening. Until next episode, and as we say in Argentina, ciao ciao. Original music by Gary LaPoe. You can find all links in the show notes at languagealchemy.com.